All right, we are live. Sorry for starting um 3 minutes late, but sometimes things happen. But welcome to the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season, everybody. It is June 1st, 2026, Monday evening. Hope you all are having a great evening. And over the next hour, we're going to basically kick off the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season like I do every single year, especially if you've been following me for the past few years. You know that this has pretty much become an annual tradition for us now. So we're going to talk about what to expect for the 2026 hurricane season, including taking a look at forecasts, and I'll be releasing my own forecast to all of you this year for this year's hurricane season. And yeah, we're gonna do a lot of things. I have some special guests with me. One of my friend Nate from Jamaica.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss the Great Atlantic.
Yeah, yes, sir. We are the greatest. um, that's a topic for another time. Um, but yeah, we're gonna have fun, talk about what's going on in the tropics, and of course, talk about the hurricane season ahead. And definitely a different kind of hurricane season this year, right? um, Probably something that we have not seen in a few years, I guess, or probably more than just a few years at this point. But it is at the start of yet another hurricane season nonetheless. So, are you ready, Nate?
I believe I am.
All right, so let's start off 2026 Atlantic hurricane season. What are the names for this year? Starting off, Arthur, Bertha, then Cristobal, and if you've recognized this naming list, it's because we've used it before. The same naming list as the infamous 2020 hurricane season. We have recycled the naming list. We are now back to the naming list this year because the names recycle, or the lists recycle every 6 years. So we are now back to it. Obviously, we are definitely, and I can tell you with confidence, there's probably no way in heck that we are going to get a 2020 like season this year. So wouldn't entertain the idea right now, but we do have the same naming lists. Sometimes, not always, do superstitions, happen, same naming list, maybe same kind of season. No, we're not going to get that. But we are going to start with Arthur, and probably going to see Arthur soon. Not exactly sure, but I guess we'll talk about that in a little bit. In the Eastern Pacific, though, the first name on the list is Amanda, and this is obviously also the same naming list from the 2020 Pacific hurricane season, and we are probably going to actually get pretty far down the naming list in the Eastern Pacific this year. Amanda is the first name, and I'd say we should get down to potentially Rachel. Definitely, probably the last column I would say is where we're going to get down to. Maybe Rachel, maybe Vance, and is Vance a familiar name, right? Or maybe we might get to the last three names here, the X, Y, and Z names, which the Eastern Pacific has, although we never really use the last three names here. I mean, the Eastern Pacific added these last three, I guess, supplementary names, and they obviously have their own supplementary list as well. But we've never used it before, so maybe we'll get to use it this year. And looking at,
we haven't used it in either basin, have we?
You're talking about the new supplementary list for. Yeah, no, we've not used it in either basin.
Yeah.
So shocking. Yeah, it is so shocking after the 2020.
It's been around for a number of years now. We still haven't used it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll use it at some point, right? I don't know.
Yeah. This year.
Huh?
I I would think Epoch should use it this year.
Maybe.
Probably.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Because the current naming list, because the East Pack has the extra three names. Because we only get down to W, while the East Pack gets down to
Oh
Z.
yeah, yeah,
So
right.
that's 24 names we have to burn through total, and I'm not sure if we're gonna get to that. But we have a naming list. Amanda's on the first name, or Amanda is the first name on the list. And taking a look at what is happening in the Eastern Pacific right now, we may get Amanda soon, right?
Oh yeah, there's an AY over there, right?
Yep. Invest 90E. The National Hurricane Center right now has 90% chance of development in the next 7 days, with a medium chance of development now in the next 48 hours, and that's probably going to continue to increase. But I think we are definitely going to get Amanda here in the Eastern Pacific in the next week, because we have two areas of interest. Funny how the Atlantic hurricane season starts today, but in reality, the Eastern Pacific is the one that's really starting up.
Yeah.
And
Honestly, I thought Tupac would have an AOI even earlier than last week, because I mean their season started from May 15, but
right.
it took a while for everything to really get going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of typical that they sometimes start in, early June instead of mid to late May, like they're like
True.
climatology wise, they typically start. But I mean, they're starting now nonetheless, and this year is probably going to be a very active hurricane season here in the Pacific, especially given that we already have two areas of interest, both of which are, in my opinion, very likely to form. I think probably both will form, and definitely this first one here, which is tagged Invest 90E, which happened today and is the first invest of the Pacific hurricane season. So, fun that we have an invest already right out of the gate here on the first day of hurricane season in the Atlantic. Um, and then, but and then we also have another area of interest here. This first area, Invest 90E, more than likely is going to go out to sea, probably just be a first name to check off the list for the Eastern Pacific. But this second area here, closer to Mexico and Central America, up to a 40% chance of development right now in the next 7 days. So this is beginning to increase in its chances as well. And I think this will be something that we'll have to watch closely, much more closely, especially given that it's closer to Mexico. But conditions definitely look favorable for this area here, and maybe we might get a hurricane in the Pacific in the next week or so, and I'll talk about that more in just a little bit. But Nate, two areas of interest to start off the Pacific season. Quite a bit, right?
Yeah, and I guess it's a sign of things to come, because we do expect quite an active season in the Eastern Pacific.
Yeah. And very interestingly enough, this first area here, 90E, is past 120 degrees west in longitude. And I made a tweet about that earlier today. We have not seen, at least in recent recorded history, a development in the Eastern Pacific past 120 degrees west. Like, I'd say having an invest out here this early in the season is pretty much equivalent to the Atlantic getting an MDR storm in June. And obviously, whenever that happens, usually that definitely tells us that, we are more than likely going to have a very active Atlantic hurricane season. So, quite the setup happening right now in the Eastern Pacific. But in the Atlantic, on the other hand, on the first day of hurricane season here, nothing expected in the next 7 days. And I think that's probably going to be a pretty common theme this year, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, nothing expected in the next 7 days. Here's the satellite imagery of what is going on in the Atlantic right now. and nothing to speak of. Dry conditions all throughout the Atlantic. I mean, we have some clouds here in the eastern Atlantic, although they are not very convective. They're mainly just upper level cirrus clouds here, which are blowing very quickly in a west to east direction, very much indicative of strong westerly shear in the atmosphere, which is typical this time of year in the Atlantic. Even in active seasons, I guess we have strong wind shear early on, but especially this year, we're going to see a lot of strong wind shear consistently throughout the deep tropics since we will be in El Nino, and especially this, dryness that we have throughout the tropics here and into the Caribbean. And uh, you in Jamaica, Nate, you are definitely seeing that dryness, right?
Yep. Rainfall has been hard to come by in a few areas in the past
Mm-hmm.
maybe month or so. We actually did start the year pretty well in terms of precipitation. The
Right.
first 3 to 4 months, most areas actually got um average or slightly above average rainfall. So it's actually not been too bad so far, but a lot of people here are actually worried that that is a sign of things to come in terms of, I guess, the balance throughout
Mm-hmm.
the year, because sometimes areas that have above average rainfall to start the year, by the time rainy season comes, there's a deficit. So a lot of people are looking out for that right now.
Yeah, right. And El Nino tends to not really favor the Caribbean much in terms of moisture, since all of it tends to be um, concentrated in the Pacific, and we tend to see a lot of sinking motion in the Atlantic because of El Nino. And so, because of that, I'm sure you guys definitely don't get a lot of tropical waves that are able to make it into the Caribbean. So, yeah, that definitely makes sense as to the pattern that we are seeing right now. But in the Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, things are definitely looking much different. In fact, you could already see here within the ITCZ, which is very active already, lots of convection and convective activity and thunderstorms here blowing up across the Eastern Pacific. And part of that has to do with the fact that obviously the atmosphere is much more favorable there this year. And, we're already starting to see those effects of El Nino in place, but also the MJO moving through the Pacific right now, which is obviously helping to amplify showers and thunderstorm activity across the tropics, as MJO typically does. And you could also see, especially right around 125 west here, that is Invest 90E. And let's actually zoom in on the satellite here. And, blowing up some decent convection right now, but what especially perks my eye with Invest 90E is the fact that it already seems to have some pretty decent spin. And I think you could actually see it much better here with this visible satellite shot here. So Invest 90E already coming along pretty well. Obviously, still has some work to do, but it's got some nice spin to it. What do you think about it, Nate?
Yeah, like you can see some fairly robust rotation in the mid to low level clouds,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see the upper level pattern opening up. You can see that ULAC starting to form above it as well. It's a pretty healthy invest in my opinion.
Yeah, right. And you could definitely see the upper level outflow beginning to start in it. Now, this is probably not going to have a lot of time to really intensify here over the next several days, as this is going to move northward pretty quickly, and conditions do become much less favorable pretty quickly. I mean, that's to be expected given that it's the far western portions of the Eastern Pacific early on in the season. But I mean, this definitely already looks pretty favorable. It looks healthy, and you can already see the upper level cloud motion kind of moving away from it here on the northern flank. So definitely some decent outflow. And here's the latest ASCAP pass, courtesy of Cyclonic Weather. And thank you to cyclonicweather.com. operated by Alex Borham. Shout out to him for giving us this data here. Cyclonic weather really has done a good job, and please don't let Levi Cowan hear this. Cyclonic weather has really done a good job in adding a lot of tools, especially for tropical tracking over the last several years. And ASCAT is one of them. So we have access through ASCAT, for ASCAT through cyclonic weather. And you could see this satellite shot here is as of 17Z. So I'd say this is roughly 1 o'clock this afternoon Eastern time. So a little bit outdated, but you could already see the beginnings here of low-level center beginning to form. Obviously, it's not closed yet. We still have these wind bars here kind of moving in a very elongated shape. We don't have a tight low-level center here that is completely closed off and round just yet. But it certainly makes sense that you could already see the beginnings here of a low-level center forming, especially when you look at the satellite shot here, and probably as well if you look at it closely here. And interestingly enough, we have some, convective bursts blowing up here right near the center in these recent frames. So I'd say that we are probably definitely going to see a tropical depression form out of this in the next 2 or so days. What do you say about that? Oh, is Nate there? Hopefully he's
Yeah, my
there.
bad, my mic was
Oh,
off. But yeah, the ASCAT pass basically complements what we were talking about earlier with the rotation in the mid to low level clouds on satellite. You see those whitish grayish cloud formations. So yeah, I agree. I
mm-hmm,
believe that in a few days we should see the first epoch storm of the season from this invest.
right.
Um, provided that the environment remains favorable enough.
Yeah, and not just the ASCAT data, but you could also see it on the 850 millibar vorticity map as well. Roughly right around the area where 90E is here. That definitely looks like some pretty decent vorticity signatures beginning to show up here as well. Now, obviously, still kind of elongated here. It's not the tight round ball that we typically look at for the vorticity signature on this map, but as this continues to consolidate over the next few days here, you'll definitely see how that really begins to take shape, and you'll see that this will develop a pretty nice vorticity signature here, the more classic look on the map, of course, provided that, obviously, this develops. But I think there's pretty solid confidence that this is going to develop. I think it's very likely that it will. And let's take a look at the GFS here over the next several days, and you could see, yeah, it does. And I think pretty much all of the models have Invest 90E developing. I mean, it does have a 90% chance of development after all, so I guess it is a very, very high likelihood that something will develop here. But you could see on the GFS map here, 850 millibar vorticity as well. It goes from the elongated kind of string of vorticity that it is right now, broad, low level center, to a nice tight ball here, closed isobars concentrated around one circular area here. And it already gets that classic look roughly 2 to 3 days from now. So I'd say we're probably looking at a tropical development out of this system around Thursday or Friday. And then beyond that, kind of moves on off here to the north and northwest. And it'll probably be short-lived. Again, this is probably only going to be a brief name that we get out of the Eastern Pacific as it kind of begins to fizzle out here by the time we get to day 5. But a system nonetheless, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, typical early season stuff,
Right,
in my opinion.
right. But then, as you can see here, as we get towards day 7, you start to see something else forming here in the Eastern Pacific. And I'd say this is going to be something very interesting that we'll have to watch in the Eastern Pacific. And this is going to be induced by the Central American gyre pattern that will be in place. I mean, it's already beginning to take shape right now. As you can see, quite a bit of vorticity already beginning to build here near Central America. And you can kind of see that happen, especially over the next 7 days here. And then finally, I guess we start to see one low pressure that begins to consolidate here roughly around 6 days out. And then already going just to about 7 days out, you can see the GFS really taking this, and this already looks like a pretty decent system by the time we get to early next week. And this is probably going to be the other area that we will need to watch. And as I said before, it's going to be much closer to the Mexican coastline. So this first system here in the Eastern Pacific is going to go out to sea, not really going to do much, definitely not going to threaten anybody. But the second system here, we're going to have to probably keep a much closer eye on it. And taking a look at the long range models, taking a look at the ensembles, and I mean, I like to look at the ensembles for the purpose of seeing how things play out in the long range. And you can see, especially as we get beyond 7 days, that's when things really start to flourish here, closer to Mexico with the second area of interest. Quite a few ensembles on the 12Z European showing some pretty decently strong members, potentially, maybe getting a hurricane out of this. And that also shows up as well on the Google AI ensembles. So, what do you think about the chances that we get a strong storm out of this, or a decent storm in the very least?
Um, that's a good question because I've come to realize especially in recent years,
Mm-hmm.
that the storms closer to Mexico are typically quite unpredictable because you would
That's
think
true.
that being so close to land, especially some dry areas of South Mexico, you would
Right.
think that the storms would struggle and not become much before they end up going inland. But we've seen a fair few storms in the past few years that have, like, they've taken advantage of the environment and have, like, been off to the races in the short time that they have.
Mm-hmm.
I think one big factor is how warm those areas close to Mexico have been, that kind of help with convective activity to offset the dry air that normally moves off Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it's pretty interesting that storms close to the continent seem to be on a trend where I mean, they're a struggle for models. We've seen models struggle with them in a lot in recent times. So, to be honest, and then you also have the steering to worry about because they show it staying off land for now. Who knows?
Right.
Maybe in a couple of days they're all showing it go inland, and but you never know. You never know, honestly.
Right. Yeah. The Central American gyre patterns are kind of unpredictable, and that kind of shows itself here on the GFS. If I must take it out beyond 7 days, which is, I like to say, is very much forbidden, although I quite often do it. But yeah, the GFS actually crashes this into Central America here, and actually into southern Mexico as we get out to day 8, 9, and 10. So I guess it's really going to depend on how this interacts and comes from the Central American gyre pattern here. I guess if it kind of forms in the Eastern Pacific, but still kind of remains in the gyre, or embedded within the gyre, maybe it'll kind of get driven into Central America. But that might make things interesting for the Atlantic side of things, because what if we end up getting energy that lifts northward from whatever is left over in the Eastern Pacific, and it tries to reignite in the Gulf, because that's happened several times. So
Yeah, yeah,
we'll see. And very very early on for this, but I've been paying attention to some of the models today, and I'm not sure if it's necessarily related to this system, but they do show something happening, specifically the European and the Euro AI model. They are showing something going on in the Gulf as we get towards around the mid-June timeframe, and I think you could actually start to see it show up a little bit here on the ensembles. Um, like, I mean, I only have the Eastern Pacific, view here, but you could see in the Gulf, especially as we get towards around 300 hours out, there are a few European ensembles showing some sort of lows that try to lift northward from the Gulf, and actually a few decent ensembles here, to be quite honest with you. And then taking a look at the AIFS model, the AI model. This is not the AIFS. This is the Google AI ensembles. Also, one or two ensembles here that try to pop off in the Gulf. I mean, most of them are in the Eastern Pacific, and I guess that's the general favored area right now. Um, but it's hurricane season, so we got to watch the Gulf regardless, and especially with the Central American gyre patterns, all sorts of things happen, and things can honestly change on a daily basis. So I'd say we're definitely going to have to watch the Gulf here in the next 2 weeks, but a especially focused here on the Eastern Pacific, and to kind of show you why I'm especially interested in this area here. One thing that'll definitely be working for it is the fact that we will have a very favorable upper level environment. This is the GEFS ensemble forecast for the upper level 200 millibar winds, and like we were talking about earlier with Invest 90E, kind of looking like it'll have decent or how Invest 90E kind of looks like it has decent outflow right now.
Oh
Well,
yeah, that's a good pattern.
yeah,
That is a
yeah,
good.
you see it. You see the replay on. Yeah, definitely looks good. I mean, you have that classic fanning out in the upper levels of the wind moving away in a cyclonic pattern from the low pressure. I mean, that's what you typically look at if you're looking at a favorable upper level pattern. You need this kind of like
Yeah.
cyclonic flow outward away from the storm, because especially when you have a really good upper level pattern, it really helps a storm ventilate, right? It's kind of like we breathe in, which I guess you could say is kind of like the lower level inflow of a storm, and then when we breathe out, and we need to breathe out because if we don't breathe out, we die, we suffocate. Um, that's the outflow of a hurricane and a developing tropical system. You need good outflow so that it can thrive and grow. And I mean, that's a pretty good upper level pattern here in the next, as we get into the next 7 days, in the
And
Eastern Pacific.
as I was mentioning earlier with the dry continental air, a pattern
Hmm.
like that would help a lot with like keeping that at bay. So you
Right,
have that strong poleward channel, which is not very typical of early season epoch storms. But
right.
if this one were to get it, then that would really support its journey if it straddles the coast.
Yeah. And I mean, uh, especially seeing this pattern show up, it definitely makes a lot of sense, especially when you see that a lot of the ensembles here of both the European and the Google AI, but especially the Google AI, is quite interesting in that it shows quite a bit of strong ensembles already. Um, like I see a number of ensembles here getting into like the 940s and 930s off the coast of Mexico, and obviously this is like within the 1 to 2 week time frame, so it's very far out, but uh, an interesting storm indeed to track here in the Eastern Pacific in the next week, and definitely it looks like we are at the beginning of already an active period here in the Eastern Pacific, and it makes sense because of the fact that we are expecting an active season. So I guess we're already beginning to see the fruits of it, right?
Yeah.
And of course, something we can't forget: the MJO is definitely going to be favorable for us as well. It's in phase 7 right now. And I mean, this is the GFS, and you could see it kind of slowly over time moves into phase 8 here, but it's, I guess, going to kind of be in between. But the Euro definitely much more aggressive in bringing the MJO into Phase 8, which is the Western Hemisphere, and the Eastern Pacific, which is why this is very interesting. But I guess Phase 7 is still favorable for the Eastern Pacific as well. But the MJO is going to be favorable too, and the MJO is a very big part in obviously looking at, seeing whether or not the atmosphere is actually favorable for tropical development. Honestly, the MJO is probably, if not the number one building block, especially on the sub-seasonal level, because on the seasonal level, what do we typically look at? We look at El Nino, we look at SSTs, but I'd say the number one building block on the sub-seasonal level, like on a week-to-week basis, tracking the season, the MJO is probably, in my opinion, the most important, if not definitely one of the most, and we're going to have that. So all systems to go here for the Eastern Pacific to get very active over the course of the next few weeks. And, well, it's probably already going to start here in the next few days with Invest 90E very likely going to develop. So, quite an active season upcoming here, right?
I would believe so. I mean, that's been on the cards for quite a while.
Right.
So it's just up to the basin itself to get things going.
Yep. All right. So, since we're talking about active seasons in the Pacific, let's move on to predictions, right? I think what everybody here has been waiting for. And just to review, I did actually release my 2026 Pacific hurricane season prediction on Twitter about 2 weeks ago at the start of the Pacific hurricane season, which was on May 15th. And I predicted 18 to 24 named storms, 10 to 14 hurricanes, and 8 to 10 major hurricanes. So going back to the naming list here, 24 would get us all the way to the end here because there's 24 names on the list in the Eastern Pacific. So that would get us all the way to the end at Z. But my prediction also includes Central Pacific activity. So you would probably have to subtract a few from the Eastern Pacific and assume that they're going to be in the Central Pacific instead. So there's that. But 18 to 24 named storms still, that's a very active season. And ace-wise, I would say that's roughly about 180 to maybe somewhere like 210, 220 maybe. So hyperactive, that's definitely for sure. And a very active season in general, I expect here in the Pacific. And then for my landfall forecast, I said this before, Mexico, and I especially think the Mexican coastline, especially the central Mexican coastline, is one of my biggest areas this year. Although I think in general, most of the Mexican coastline should be on very high alert. And I guess we're already beginning to see that play out here with whatever might potentially be on the cards within the next week. But especially central Mexico, I think we could potentially get a very strong late season storm that'll probably recurve back into Mexico.
Yeah.
Like a few storms in particular, if you know what I mean.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So very active season, definitely on the cards. And Hawaii too, under a heightened risk. I didn't go with a high risk for Hawaii just yet, but I'm kind of tempted to do so. Hawaii, the Central Pacific, I will say this, I do believe the Central Pacific will be very active this year, given the fact that we have a very strong El Nino in place. And the Central Pacific tends to be very active in, strong El Nino years. So I definitely think we're probably going to see quite a bit of activity in the Central Pacific, and probably quite a few threats to Hawaii.
I think somebody made a joke that Hawaii is probably the most threatened U.S. state this year because of the El Nino.
Yeah, a lot. Honestly, I really feel like sometimes Hawaii is kind of forgotten as a state. But no, it is a part of the United States, and we're gonna have to watch out for our friends in Hawaii this year. It's really gonna be an active season there,
Of course.
in my opinion. So if you're in Hawaii, definitely make sure you are prepared for this season. But with that being said, here's the part that I think everybody has been waiting for. My Atlantic hurricane season predictions as of June 1st. I am forecasting a below normal season, slightly below normal season, as I think you would expect all the other forecasts have been showing. I'm going with 12 named storms, 5 hurricanes, and 2 major hurricanes. Um, so I guess that's along the lines of what everybody else has been forecasting, right?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Um, and we'll review we'll review what the other forecasts are in just a little bit. But those are my numbers, and ace wise, I say that probably would be reflected by 80 to 85 ace points. So, what do you think about that?
I think my numbers are fairly similar. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a decent forecast. Um, I would say it's probably, well, for the ACE, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's probably closer to the ceiling that I would expect for
Right.
this season. But yeah, it's a good forecast in my opinion.
Thank you. We'll see how right it ends up being. But with my landfall forecast, here's what I expect impact wise in the Atlantic. Given that it's going to be an El Nino, that should probably mean that most of the Caribbean is going to be safe this season. Especially for you in Jamaica, I would hope that you are safe from any impacts, any major impacts this year, especially given with what you dealt with last year, Nate. um,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I would hope that the Caribbean is not going to get much, but typically in an El Nino pattern, we don't really see much happen um, in the Caribbean, so I don't expect that. Might have some impacts in the Northern Islands if we get something that kind of develops, especially in the Bahamas. Though I think the Bahamas will be at a pretty high risk of getting something this year. Florida is at a moderate risk. The Yucatan and the Gulf, though, we tend to see activity really concentrated off the East Coast, especially in very El Nino like years. So that's where I think we will probably see most of our impacts this year. So um, that is generally the idea that I'm going with. And the highest risk, in my opinion, for landfall this year will be in the Carolinas. And I think it is, in my opinion, probably pretty likely uh, that we will get something either to directly make landfall or get very near the Carolinas coast, and maybe Florida too. I'm hesitant about putting Florida in a high risk this year, just given, especially the east coast of Florida, given how things typically are. Um, but we will see what happens this year, right? We will see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, but you can make educated guesses and I guess hope that they're right in some cases.
Right. Yeah, but overall, track wise, I do think that there will probably be, and this is something that I think a lot of people are not really taking into account for, but based on a gut feeling, and some people might say that that's not scientific, but I don't care. Based on a gut feeling, I just think that there is going to be that one strong storm that probably brings pretty significant impacts. And I'd imagine it's more than likely going to come from the MDR, maybe be just north of the MDR, and probably bring impacts to the Caribbean, and probably threaten the Bahamas and threaten either Florida or the Carolinas. And that would probably be our storm of the year. And I mean, just because it's an El Nino, does not mean that we are, you know, we are safe from impacts. The season is going to be dead, nothing to track. It's not going to be exciting or anything like that at all. I mean, probably most people would not want an exciting hurricane season because that would be disastrous. But um, you know, just because we are in an El Nino this year does not mean that nothing is going to happen, and I do not think nothing will happen. I'd say, especially if you are along the southeast coast, I think that you guys are probably at the biggest risk for a hurricane impact, in my opinion, this year. So let's take a look at what all the other predictions have been for this year so far, and kind of compare and see how my forecast compares to others. And generally, mostly everybody else has kind of been around the same range of 12 or 13 named storms. We have North Carolina State University. They went with 12 to 15, so I guess they're a little bit on the higher end. And then we have that one forecast from April from University of Arizona where they went with 20 named storms and 9 hurricanes and 4 major hurricanes. That was an interesting prediction.
that is quite interesting. 6 to 9 hurricanes.
Well, that's the North Carolina. Yeah.
What I wonder what's the thought process behind that. Cause
University of Arizona. That was a very confusing forecast. And from what I've read, and from the reasoning that I've read behind their forecast, is because they expected back in April that the Atlantic would warm up, and but obviously, as I'll show you in a little bit, we have not really seen that happen significantly. Although it could still happen. It could still happen. We still have time. We're just at the beginning of the hurricane season, and I do expect that we probably will see warming at some point in the Atlantic during the summer, and it typically happens during the summer. But I guess I don't know. University of Arizona has a very
yeah,
fascinating forecast. Let's just say
yeah,
that.
20 storms is crazy. I
Yeah,
can't see why you would put that out. 20? I
yeah.
mean,
From what it seems like,
you
they kind of expect a um 2023 type situation. I don't know.
oh yeah, I think I do remember seeing something about that. But I don't see the support for that, honestly.
Right.
Because I mean the Atlantic was much different then.
Yeah, and
And
I actually have the maps here. First of all, this is the sea surface temperature anomaly map from, and you know what? Let's actually compare this year to 2023 first to see just exactly how both of those years played out. And first of all, in the Atlantic, sea surface temperature anomalies right now, uh, decently above normal throughout most of the tropics. Some below normal sea surface temperature anomalies here in the eastern Atlantic. Um, and I mean, I guess we kind of have a positive AMO signature here where we have warmth near Greenland, and then it kind of goes down into the Canary Current here. Although I guess the warmth is kind of a little bit displaced away from the tropics. But the Atlantic doesn't look horrible. But compare that to 2023, we already had near record sea surface temperature anomalies, especially in the eastern Atlantic. And that it was a major factor in helping offset the El Nino that we had that year, which was a very strong one. And let's compare how the El Nino looks like from that year to now. This year, we are definitely further ahead, though. I will say that. And the Pacific, as well as a whole, is definitely much warmer, too. Um,
yeah,
and so we are probably going to deal with a stronger El Nino this year, and a definitely much, much, much significantly less warm Atlantic. But on the other hand, something interesting is 2018. And I mean, I bring up 2018 for the fact that 2018 was the most active season on record in the Eastern Pacific in terms of ACE. Even though we didn't really have a strong El Nino that year, we kind of had a somewhat developing El Nino that barely became a weak El Nino. But the
Yeah.
Atlantic, on the other hand, was completely polar opposite to 2023. We had near record cold sea surface temperature anomalies in the Eastern Atlantic. Yet, if you recall what happened in 2018, we still had storms like Florence and Michael, and honestly, quite a decently active season, if I'll be quite honest with you. And that
Yes, shock a
happened
lot of people.
in a season that was much more favorable to the Pacific. And I mean, comparing the sea surface temperature anomaly look from this year to 2018, definitely wouldn't say is that it definitely wouldn't say it's as bad as 2018 if I'm going to be completely honest with you. And I mean, with 2018 as well, we did have that one major impact. Well, it was more like two major impacts, Florence and Michael, but one of them was in the Carolinas. So, kind of using that as a driving factor into me really thinking that the Carolinas will be a pretty interesting place to watch this year. But honestly, you know what? Let's go look at this right now. Here's 2015 with the sea surface temperature anomalies. Let me really. Oh no, this is January. Let me get to June. Here's how 2015 looked like in terms of the sea surface temperature anomalies. Definitely similar in the Pacific. I mean, we have a strong El Nino brewing, and more than likely, and I'll show you this in a little bit, but more than likely, we're going to get a strong El Nino. I guess you could say similar to how strong the El Nino was in 2015, because 2015 we had a super El Nino. But even when you look at this year compared to 2015 as well, um, the Atlantic definitely looks better. I mean, we have quite a bit more in the way of cooler sea surface temperature anomalies in the MDR in 2015 compared to this year. And I just say that overall, we definitely have a more positive AMO look. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think yeah, overall the basin looks better this year, SST
Mm-hmm.
wise. The Canary current, it could be a bit better, but it's not terrible.
Yeah.
And as you said, the MDR is obviously better this year than it was in 2015.
And
So
definitely 2018. I mean, both of those years, the
yeah,
Atlantic just really
2018's MDR was very cool.
right.
So we do have that kind of, well, you would think would probably help to make the season not completely dead
Yeah,
in the
and I
case
mean,
of the strong El
2015.
Nino. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean 2015 numbers wise, I think the ace was probably pretty low, but named storms, I think we ended up with like 11. So
I think so. Yeah,
that's not like near record inactive, unlike
right.
what I see a lot of people are saying online. And I'm saying this because I see a lot of forecasts online, and people are thinking that this year is going to be the most inactive season on record. And Um, I don't know when you look at 2018 and 2015, which were among the last few significant El Nino events that we had. Well, especially 2015. 2015 is probably the most comparable to this year, and you take a look at the profile of the sea surface temperatures. To me, it looks slightly. To me, the way we look in the Atlantic right now looks slightly better than 2015. And something very interesting as well, and I especially want to know what you think about this, Nate. Although we did talk about it before the live stream, the PDO, interestingly enough, is still negative. The latest April value for the PDO is at negative 1.25, and weirdly enough, the PDO has been on a negative trend since December. And let's compare the PDO to how it looked like in 2015 this time. And by the time we got to April and May of 2015, the April 2015 index of the PDO was positive 1.1. So we are pretty much on the complete opposite end of the PDO here.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is probably the, I guess, a silent factor that will kind of, if it doesn't change, of course, that will kind of limit the Pacific somewhat,
Mm-hmm.
because we do know that the PDO kind of, it causes stability issues in the basin. So honestly, to be seeing this downtrend with the temperatures in the PDO regions are honestly surprising. Because I would have thought that in tandem with the El Nino, you'd have actually seen it continue to warm, but that's not been the case. So we'll have to see how things transition as we have, well, basically enter summer now, and
Mm-hmm.
how it coincident, well, how it affects the EPAC region.
Definitely. And I mean, the Eastern Pacific sea surface temperature anomaly wise is very warm, so I guess we will probably see any effects of the negative PDO be offset a little bit. So I guess, we'll probably still see a very active season. I think it's still very much guaranteed that we will see an active season in the Eastern Pacific.
Yeah,
And
yeah, for
just
sure.
generally given the fact that we'll have a very strong El Nino this year. And let's dive into the El Nino a little bit more. First of all, with the subsurface sea surface temperature anomalies here, we have quite a mean subsurface, that is for sure. And obviously, we saw the transit of a lot of very warm water from the Western Pacific, and it really built into this incredible warmth below the surface here in the Eastern Pacific. And now we're starting to see a lot of that warmth really begin to surface. And well, that's definitely going to be helped by the fact that very strong westerly wind bursts. I wouldn't say very strong, but decently strong westerly wind bursts are in place right now across much of the tropical Pacific, especially here coming up in the Eastern Pacific. And that's definitely going to help in terms of tropical activity as well in the Eastern Pacific too in the next several weeks here, going out to mid-June. So as we get more of these strong westerly wind bursts, that's really going to help bring a lot of this incredible warmth that we have beneath the surface here in the equatorial Pacific. So either way, I think it's pretty much guaranteed that we're going to have a very strong El Nino this year. And with the climate models, here's the cantips, and you can see how that plays out. Uh, yeah, we have a very strong El Nino. It's going to be basin wide, warm. Although, interestingly enough, if you look at the cantips here, as we go out into time, as we get into late this year and into early next year, the cantips eventually shows the PDO flipping positive. So maybe it happens late. Not exactly sure, but we'll see. But either way, very strong El Nino expected. I'd say the cantips probably peaks at super El Nino intensity, and then we have the CFS on the other hand, which forecasts us to reach 3 Celsius in terms of El Nino strength, and if that happens, that would be record breaking. So I think taking a look at all the models, at least all the models that we have right now for the month of May, uh, I think it is very much certain that we are going to see a very strong El Nino this year. But I will be very interested to see how the PDO kind of interacts with this El Nino because typically with El Nino, we tend to see the tropical Pacific warm up, and that should allow for the PDO to flip positive, meaning that we have a lot of warm water here in the tropical Pacific, but the subtropics here should be colder. Kind of like in the Atlantic with the positive AMO, we have a lot of deep tropical warmth, so we have a lot of below normal anomalies in the subtropics. The PDO is pretty much the same thing, but in the Pacific. But we have a lot of warmth right now here in the subtropics, and you can kind of see that still showing a negative PDO horseshoe shape, despite the
Yeah,
fact that the tropical Eastern Pacific is still very warm, and we have a very strong El Nino coming on here. So we'll see how the two battle out with each other, and we'll see what ultimately ends up happening in the end. But maybe things are not as clear cut that this season will be extremely dead and below normal, which is why I'm forecasting still a below normal season. Obviously, that we're going to have a very strong El Nino in place. And actually, I should mention this as well. Let's take a look at the Atlantic here, sea surface temperature anomaly wise, and something that I'm also paying attention to as well. I mentioned it before, but the Atlantic typically warms up by the time we get to the summer here, and the Cansips is definitely indicating it that. We go from pretty below normal sea surface temperature anomalies right now to by the time we get to August, the Cansips seems to hint here that the deep tropics will warm up pretty decently here in the Atlantic, and I think that's also what happened in 2018 as well. Although just removing the 2018 idea right now, I think it'll be interesting to watch and see whether or not the deep tropics actually warm up here, because maybe that'll give us a little bit of what's the word, resistance by the time we get to the peak of the hurricane season, that something will try to sneak through and develop. And I still think we're going to have some activity here, especially by the time we get to the peak, especially if things warm up here, like the CANSIP suggests. And taking a look at the precip anomalies as well. Not very, I mean, obviously, though, given that it's El Nino, it's not a very favorable look. We have drier conditions here throughout the MDR and also throughout the Caribbean as well. So I guess the biggest area that we would have to watch will more than likely be in the southwestern Atlantic, as you can kind of see being hinted here on the models, especially for August. But the southwestern Atlantic is closer to us, and that's where we do see a lot of very warm sea surface temperature anomalies right now. And obviously, that is where I have my highest risk for this year. So I guess you guys can see how it all connects and what my general thoughts are for this hurricane season. But obviously, we will see how it all plays out here over the next 183 days. Or I guess today is day one, and I guess we have 182 days beyond that. So, Nate, before we end off here, what are your thoughts about this season?
Well, I would say not much different from yours. Personally, I believe that considering the factors that we just discussed, the
Mm-hmm.
Bermuda Triangle area is one of my hotspots for the season.
Right.
Uh, I do believe that we'll get a good bit of subtropical activity as well, considering how warm the models project that area to be.
Right. Let's
And
actually
the
look at
MDR
that
isn't
here.
too bad either. The MDR isn't too bad either. So I believe that we could get a fair few storms out of the MDR, especially the eastern MDR, because
Right.
those areas aren't affected as much by shear induced by El Nino as like the Caribbean. So I would expect a decent number of storms out of the MDR, and then probably go into the subtropics and strengthen for a bit if they can, as we've seen in the past few years. That's
Mm-hmm.
been a trend. Um, I do agree that the Caribbean should be under little threat this year. If you're living in maybe the eastern islands, you're likely, well, not likely, but there's a greater chance for you to be affected by a storm or two, because those areas still do every now and then they're affected by a storm in El Nino.
Mm-hmm.
It's normally when they start traveling through the Caribbean that they tend to suffer and then uh, dissipate. But in the Eastern Caribbean, I would expect that at some point, most likely during August, in my opinion, you'd probably see a storm that threatens that area. But there's nothing to be worried about. You just have to be prepared. In my opinion, for the Caribbean people, we should look more into how we can mitigate the effects of the likely drought that we'll experience.
Right.
Conserving the water and all that.
Let
And
me
of
show
course,
that
to
here
also
on the precip
yeah,
anomalies, and you could see uh, definitely something that'll be a very common theme, and it shows up especially a lot more on the CFS. Also, a typical
exactly.
pattern that we see in El Nino is quite dry conditions throughout the Caribbean and obviously throughout the deep tropics in general. And obviously, that is because El Nino tends to focus all of the energy and the rising motion in the atmosphere in the Pacific, which leads to sinking air in the Atlantic, and also from all the rising motion in the Atlantic as well. The Pacific, not the Atlantic. um, we get a lot of westerly wind shear that'll probably help cut off quite a bit of tropical waves, and I'm pretty sure that is also going to cut off a lot of moisture for you guys. So probably pretty significant dry conditions, and it really shows up here in October in the Caribbean. That looks pretty significant. Um,
Yeah, I honestly I'm pretty worried about summer and autumn because I mean, like, trust me, it isn't nice at all when you
mhm,
go days and weeks without proper rainfall. It is not a good feeling, especially when you're in a developing nation that depends a lot on favorable atmospheric conditions because
right,
we don't do well. We don't do well at all when the atmosphere doesn't cooperate with us. So I mean, as
yeah,
I said, all we have to do is prepare, just plan accordingly and just, hope for the best.
right.
Just hope for the best.
Right. And we've had some pretty significant drought conditions as well, especially here in the United States in the southeast. And that's a result of La Nina being a very prevalent factor. But El Nino should hopefully balance things out for us. And you could especially see that as we get into the uh, fall and winter months here, especially as the subtropical jet will be beginning to crank. That should probably bring a lot of precip to the United States, especially the southeast and Florida this winter. Something that we also see quite prevalent in El Nino. But as for hurricane season, not a lot of precip. Although, again, a big one of the biggest highlights here is off the southeast coast, where we definitely see the most amount of precipitation. Probably, in my opinion, is going to be the most favored area for tropical development this year, which is why I say once again, those along the southeast and those in the Bahamas, in my opinion, will be at biggest risk. But of course, we will see exactly how it all plays out here in these next 182 days of the hurricane season. And I'm pretty sure you will be right here with us, Nate, right?
Most definitely. I'll make every effort to be tracking. You can follow me on Twitter at WX. Well, no, that's not. No, what? My tag is weather, folks. My tag is weather, folks. My username is WX Nate. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be on Twitter and I'll be tweeting updates as often as I can.
Right,
And hopefully, there will be stuff to talk about during the hurricane season so that we can help you to understand what's going on and be prepared if necessary.
right. And hopefully you'll also join us on these live streams as well that we'll be doing throughout the season too, going over whenever we do have activity, which I'm pretty sure will happen, and especially when that one strong storm comes along. Hopefully,
Yeah,
me
yeah.
and Nate will be your source of information, and we'll also probably have some other people as well with us if I can get them on. But we will definitely be tracking throughout the season. I'm also on Twitter as well, or X, or whatever the hell you want to call it. Um, at Danilo Evangelista. Same name as here on YouTube. So if you want to follow me on Twitter as well, please feel free to go ahead and do so. But I think that's it for tonight, right? There's not really much else going on. We have 90E in the Pacific and whatever else in the Pacific that's going to happen that we're going to track. And now it's just a wait and see game to see what exactly pans out there. And again, we will definitely be watching that over the next week to 2 weeks. All right, so I think that's going to wrap it up here. Thanks for spending your evening with us, Nate, and thanks to all of you out there for tuning in tonight. Hope you guys enjoy what you saw today. And if you are new, once again, I would really recommend that you subscribe to the channel and like the stream and share the stream as well. On replay, obviously, for those who might find any information on this stream useful, or if in general you like hurricane tracking content and you are an avid hurricane tracker, I promise you, this channel is definitely the place to be. Thanks again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening and enjoy the rest of your night. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. And I'll talk to you guys again later.
Thank you for having me, Danilo. It was a pleasure to discuss all this. And God's richest blessings to you all who are listening.